Welcome to the deep dive. We take the source material you're curious about, cut through the complexity, and really give you the core essentials, fast.
And today, we're tackling something truly huge.
Yeah, maybe the single biggest engineering challenge out there, nuclear fusion reactors, often called the holy grail of clean energy.
It really is. If we crack this, it changes everything about energy. So, our mission today, get you up to speed quickly.
We'll cover the basic science, what's actually happening.
And the massive engineering race to control it. Plus, the potential. Why governments and scientists keep pouring billions into this after, 70 years?
Okay, let's start with the power involved, because it's just mind-boggling. We're talking about copying the process that powers the sun, all the stars.
Right. And here on Earth, the main reaction people are chasing uses two heavy types of hydrogen, deuterium, or D, and tritium T.
And the idea is to smash them together hard enough.
Exactly. When D and T fuse, you get helium, a neutron, and crucially, a massive release of energy. Each little reaction gives off 17.6 MeV. That's million electron volts.
Now, 17.6 MeV sounds a bit abstract. How big is that really?
Okay, think of it like this. Burning gasoline, that's like striking a match, right?
Yeah.
A single fusion reaction, that's like setting off dynamite. It's literally millions of times more energetic than burning coal or gas.
Millions. Wow.
But, the basic science isn't the hard part. It happens in the sun all the time. The challenge is, how do we actually harness that immense energy down here on Earth? We don't have the sun's massive gravity to help us out.
Right. Okay, so that's the core problem. Recreating the sun's conditions without being the sun. We need, temperatures over 100 million degrees Celsius?
Yep. And huge pressure.
Wait, 100 million degrees? That's almost 10 times hotter than the sun's core, isn't it?
It is. It sounds crazy, containing something that hot in a machine here on Earth.
The materials alone, just thinking about it, seems almost impossible.
It seems absurd, yeah. But it's necessary. See, atomic nuclei are positively charged. They naturally push each other away, electrostatic repulsion.
Like trying to push two north poles of magnets together?
Exactly. So you need that incredible heat, that 100 million degrees, just to give them enough energy to overcome that repulsion and fuse.
Okay, so since we can't use gravity like the sun, how do engineers actually handle this ridiculously hot stuff, this plasma?
Well, there are two main approaches people are pursuing.
Let's start with method one. This is the one you see most often, right? Magnetic confinement fusion, or MCF.
That's the classic approach. Think donut-shaped reactors.
Yeah.
The basic idea is pretty elegant. Use incredibly powerful magnetic fields to trap and hold the superheated plasma inside a vacuum chamber.
Like a magnetic bottle.
Sort of, yeah. And within MCF, there are two main designs you hear about. The most common is the tokamak, smooth donut shape.
That's Iterarium in France, right? The huge international project.
Exactly. ITER is the big one, 35 nations involved. Their goal is huge, demonstrate serious energy production. Put 50 megawatts in, get 500 megawatts out. They're aiming for first plasma around 2035.
Still a ways off, but huge if they hit it. What's the other MCF design?
That's the Stellarator. Think Wendelstein 7X in Germany.
Ah, the really complex, twisted-looking one.
Yeah, the geometry is way more complicated. But there's a reason. While tokamaks often run in pulses, Stellarators are designed for continuous operation.
Which is what you'd need for a real power plant, right? Not just bursts of energy.
Precisely. Long-duration stability is the name of the game for Stellarators.
Okay, so that's magnetic confinement. What's the other main route?
Completely different philosophy. Inertial confinement fusion, ICF. No continuous magnetic fields here.
So how do they contain it?
They don't, not for long anyway. ICF uses incredibly powerful lasers, or ion beams. Lots of them. All focus on one tiny little target.
A fuel pellet.
Exactly, a tiny sphere containing deuterium and tritium. They blast it from all sides, compressing it incredibly fast, incredibly hard.
And this is where we saw that big breakthrough recently, right? At the National Ignition Facility, NIF, in the U.S.
That's the one. December 2022, they achieved ignition.
A huge moment. What does ignition mean in this context?
It means for a split second, they got more energy out of the fusion reaction itself than the laser energy they put into the target. Net energy gained from the fusion.
Wow. Proof of principle, finally.
A massive milestone. It proved the physics works. But what's really interesting now is the diversity. You've got these giant government projects like ITER and NIF.
But also a lot of private companies jumping in.
Absolutely. Companies like Commonwealth Fusion Systems, CFS, Helion Energy, Tokamak Energy. They're using compact designs, different magnetic approaches, even combinations, all aiming for commercial power much faster.
Okay, so we have these incredible machines, tokamaks, stellarators, giant lasers,
Yeah.
all trying to bottle a star, but it costs billions. It's taken decades. We have to ask, is it really worth it? Why is this still the ultimate energy prize?
That's the key question, isn't it? And the answer lies in the sheer scale of the benefits if we succeed. Unlimited clean energy, basically.
Let's break that down. Start with the fuel. You mentioned deuterium and tritium.
Right, this isn't like fossil fuels where we worry about running out.
Deuterium, the D, you can get that from seawater, right? It's everywhere.
Easily extracted. About 1 in every 6,500 hydrogen atoms in ordinary water is deuterium. Enough in the oceans to power the planet for thousands, maybe millions of years.
Okay, that's effectively limitless. What about tritium, the T? That one's radioactive and rarer, isn't it?
It is, but here's the clever part. You can actually breed tritium inside the fusion reactor itself.
How?
Using lithium. The neutrons produced by the DT reaction can hit a blanket containing lithium surrounding the plasma chamber, and that interaction creates more tritium.
So you make your own fuel as you go, and lithium is pretty abundant too.
Yes, it's found widely on Earth. We use it for batteries now, but there's plenty for fusion needs. So the bottom line is, the fuel supply is virtually limitless.
Okay, fuel sorted. What about the environment? That's the big driver for clean energy.
This is where fusion really shines. First off, zero Kuyaros emissions. It's completely carbon-free power generation.
Like solar or wind, but potentially running 24/7.
Exactly. But the really big environmental win is the waste, compared to current nuclear fission plants.
Which produce waste that stays dangerous for, what, tens of thousands of years, requiring deep geological storage?
Right. Fusion is totally different. The main byproduct of the DT reaction itself is just harmless helium.
Okay. But what about the reactor materials? Don't they become radioactive?
They do, from the neutron bombardment. But it's mostly low-level waste, and crucially, it's short-lived. We're talking about radioactivity decaying to safe levels within decades, maybe a century at most. Not millennia.
Yeah.
Much easier to handle.
That's a game changer. And what about safety? People hear nuclear and think of accidents.
Another huge advantage. Fusion is intrinsically safe. You simply cannot have a runaway chain reaction like in fission.
Why not?
Because the conditions needed for fusion, that extreme heat and precise confinement, are incredibly difficult to maintain. If anything goes wrong, if the magnetic field flickers, if the plasma touches the wall,
It cools down instantly.
instantly,
Yeah.
the reaction just stops. It naturally fails safe. There's zero chance of a meltdown.
Wow. Limitless fuel, no CoRo, minimal short-lived waste, and inherently safe.
And don't forget the energy density. We touched on it earlier.
Right, the power comparison.
Yeah.
Just 1 gram of DT fuel.
Gives you the same energy as burning 8 tons of oil or 11 tons of coal.
That's staggering. That kind of density doesn't just replace existing power plants. It could unlock completely new possibilities, couldn't it?
Think large-scale water desalination. Perhaps easier space travel, industrial processes we can't even imagine now. That's the long-term vision.
Okay, the promise is clear. Limitless, clean, safe, incredibly dense energy. But if it's so great and the science works, why don't we have fusion power plants running right now? What are the big roadblocks?
Oh, yes. The reality check. This is where we hit the massive scientific and engineering hurdles that have kept fusion primarily in the lab for decades.
Hurdle number 1.
Simply achieving sustained ignition and high energy gain. Remember NEF. They achieved ignition. More energy out than in from the fuel pellet for a fraction of a second.
Right, but a power plant needs to run continuously, or at least for long periods.
Exactly. We need to get the plasma hot enough, dense enough, and keep it contained long enough so the fusion reactions generate enough heat to keep the plasma hot without constant external heating. It needs to become self-sustaining. That's proving incredibly difficult.
Which leads straight into the next challenge, doesn't it? Plasma confinement and stability.
Oh, absolutely. Trying to hold a 100 million degree gas stable using magnetic fields is, well, arguably one of the hardest physics problems humans have ever tackled.
The sources describe the plasma as unstable. It twists, writhes, and leaks energy.
It does. It's like trying to hold Jell-O with rubber bands. It just doesn't want to stay put. Any tiny imperfection, any instability, and the heat escapes, the plasma cools, and the reaction dies.
So you need incredibly precise magnetic fields.
Phenomenally precise. Superconducting magnets, complex coil shapes, and sophisticated real-time computer control systems constantly monitoring and adjusting the fields millisecond by millisecond to fight those instabilities. It's a constant battle.
Okay, instability is tough. What else? You mentioned materials earlier.
Yes, material engineering. This might be the ultimate long-term challenge for practical fusion power.
Because the inside of the reactor takes such a beating.
An unbelievable beating. Imagine the inner wall, the first wall, facing that intense heat, but also, critically, a constant barrage of high-energy neutrons produced by the fusion reaction.
What do the neutrons do to the materials?
They act like tiny bullets slamming into the atoms of the reactor wall, knocking them out of place, creating defects. Over time, this makes the material brittle, it swells, it weakens. We need materials that can withstand this for years of operation without degrading or needing constant replacement.
And finding those materials is proving difficult.
Very difficult. It's a huge area of research, developing new alloys, new composites that can handle the heat and the neutron bombardment for the lifetime of a power plant.
So putting it all together, achieving ignition, keeping the plasma stable, finding durable materials, it all boils down to energy efficiency, doesn't it? This Q1 factor.
Exactly. Q is the ratio of fusion power produced to the external power input needed to heat the plasma and run the whole system. NIF achieved ignition, where the fusion energy out briefly exceeded the laser energy hitting the target.
But that's not the whole picture for a power plant.
Not at all. For a commercial plant, Q needs to be much greater than 1, maybe Q of 10, 20, or more. You need to generate enough total electricity to cover the fusion output. PLES run the powerful magnets, the cooling systems, the lasers or heaters, everything else, and still have substantial power left over to send to the grid.
So Q1 for the whole system, not just the plasma physics. That sustained net energy gain for the entire plant is the real goal.
That's the overall technical mountain we still need to climb reliably and economically.
Despite these huge challenges you mentioned, the pace is picking up. Private investment, NIF's success.
Yes. There's definitely a new momentum. That NIF result, even though it was ICF and very brief, sent a huge signal that the physics challenges are surmountable. And it spurred a lot more private funding into various approaches.
So on the magnetic side, who's making waves? We mentioned Spark.
Right. Spark is a big one to watch. That's Commonwealth Fusion Systems working with MIT. They're using new high-temperature superconducting magnets, which could allow for smaller, potentially cheaper, to tokamaks.
And their timeline is pretty aggressive.
Very. They're aiming for a device that demonstrates net energy gain, Q1 for the system, around the mid-2020s, and potentially a commercial prototype power plant around 2030.
2030, that's really soon in fusion terms.
Yep.
Are there others pushing similar timelines?
Helion Energy is another prominent one. They use a different pulsed magnetic approach. They've made some very bold claims, promising electricity generation on the grid by 2028.
2028, that sounds incredibly optimistic given history of fusion predictions often slipping. Should we take these dates with a grain of salt?
I think a healthy dose of skepticism is always warranted with fusion timelines. There are immense engineering challenges still to solve for commercial deployment. However,
things feel different this time.
There's a sense that they might be. The combination of serious private capital, advances in computing for simulations, new materials like those superconductors, and the proof points like NIF to proofy, it does feel like the convergence needed might finally be happening. 2028 might be ambitious, but the 2030s don't seem impossible anymore for the first plants.
So if you synthesize all this, the big projects, the private players, the breakthroughs, the remaining hurdles, what's the realistic consensus view? When might we actually see fusion power contributing meaningfully to the grid?
Looking across the field, the general feeling among many experts is that the first commercial fusion power plants could start coming online in the 2030s, maybe more broadly into the 2040s.
So within the next couple of decades, potentially?
Potentially, yes. It's not guaranteed. Major challenges remain, particularly in materials and scaling up reliably. But the path seems clearer than it ever has before.
And the ultimate vision, if this pans out, it's fusion working alongside renewables, right?
Absolutely. The long-term goal isn't necessarily fusion replacing everything. It's fusion providing that firm 247 baseload power, complementing intermittent sources like solar and wind. Together, they could enable a truly clean, stable global energy grid.
Ending fossil fuel dependence for good.
That's the ultimate prize. Powering civilization cleanly for millennia.
Okay, let's wrap this up with the key takeaways for you, our listener. We're chasing the sun's power source, a reaction millions of times stronger than chemical burning.
The fuel comes from water and lithium, essentially limitless. And critically, it's inherently safe, no meltdown risk, and produces minimal short-lived waste.
The main challenges: holding that incredibly hot, unstable plasma steady long enough, and finding materials that can withstand the intense conditions inside a working reactor for years.
And achieving that crucial Q1 for the whole system, getting significantly more energy out than you put in, reliably and economically.
But the global race is accelerating with major international projects like ITER and dynamic private companies like CFS and Helion pushing for commercial power perhaps in the 2030s or 2040s.
The next couple of decades could be transformative.
Now, for a final thought to leave you with, the sources talk about fusion plus renewables creating a clean energy grid. But let's go back to that incredible energy density, 1 gram of fuel equaling 8 tons of oil.
Yeah, that concentration of power is just staggering.
So think beyond just replacing coal plants. What new possibilities open up societal, technological, when energy is effectively unlimited, incredibly dense, inherently safe, and millions of times more powerful than what built our current world? What changes when that kind of power becomes available?
That's definitely something to ponder.
We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.